Good evening or good afternoon or good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I get Zach to run a clip, I just wanted to give a bit of what we're trying to do today. And over the last 2 years, I've been able to give a course to kids about Passive House. And it's great to see a few people that are online here tonight because you've asked for this presentation and finally you get it. And the idea about tonight is I'm going to speak to all of you as kids. So tonight you're big kids. And the reason that I wanted to give it in that tone is because I'm hoping that you will take this opportunity to take the slide deck, which we will figure out how to make it open source, but you're guaranteed that you'll get this presentation in a few days and we'll figure out how to give you the slides so that you can modify it to your region and add your own twist and flavor to it so that you might have an opportunity to present to either your kids' schools or maybe even some of you young ones that are there today might be inspired to actually share it with your peers at class. Or the other option is that you could give the slide deck and the presentation and some of the demonstration here to a teacher that you might know who would want to actually put this into their class. Because the information that I'm going to provide does work for science and social studies curriculums. And I've given this from kindergarten all the way up to grade 7. I've modified the demonstrations, but it's still applicable to that entire age group. So that being said is, Zach, hit this presentation, or sorry, this little 3-minute video, and I will speak through it to give you a bit of context. So just imagine your kids have just woken up. Sorry, actually, not the parents. We're going to talk to the little kids. So imagine you just woken up, you go downstairs and you ask your mom or dad, hey, for breakfast, I'd like some toast. And so your parent goes to the toaster and they put a piece of bread in the toaster. And your parent might not look as physique as this individual because this is an Olympic cyclist who is going to demonstrate to you how much energy it creates or is required to create energy. And I know the human has a bit of a slow conversion for energy, but the premise here is you're sitting down at your table, your parent is maybe behind the wall, and all of a sudden now you see the toaster going, you hear this noise. You hear this cycling noise. You're like, okay, that's your parent working away, making sure that the toaster is getting started. Now, just give you an idea, this cyclist that of course is Olympian, the leg size is twice as mine, and you can see here this gentleman is starting to get this. Toast is getting, the bread warm into. And you can see now the effort that this cyclist is putting into now. You can hear the racket of the bike where it almost feels like it's about to fall apart. This individual is about to stand up because really exerting a lot of energy to create that energy for the toaster to work. There's sweat on his brow, muscles are all tense. So just imagine your parent is really just sweating there just because you wanted toast for breakfast. To the point where your parent is they're just trying to get that last little bit of power. And there you go. That's a demonstration that anytime that you plug any electrical device into that wall or that socket, that it takes a lot of power to create that. Now, we kind of live in a world where we take that for granted. But I want to pin that idea because we're going to talk about energy efficiency shortly. But I just want to give you the idea of just how difficult it actually is to create the energy that we use in all of our daily lives. So,
nobody can believe if you do it at the breakfast inside the toaster, nobody can believe how much work it is to toast it, huh?
No.
I know it now. It's crazy.
So again, the kid will probably eat that toast and hopefully appreciate how much work it took for their parents to create that toast. So I'll let you stop that, Zach, and I will. So again, there's the link for that presentation, and that'll be in link. So for those who haven't had the honor of meeting me, my name is Shaun St. Amour. I work in construction. I build homes, and I also get to teach about the Passos Tradesperson course at a local technical school called BCIT, which is where I'm at today, coming to you live from. Again, I'm involved with the Accelerator. I also hang out with Passivos Canada and creating some socials. And then the local construction association called Haven, I'm the chair of the Education and Technical Committee. Now, I am very passionate about sustainable prefab passive houses, which I do believe should be affordable. And then during COVID, I have to say that the word resilient, which means just making sure that we're adapting to change, because we've noticed with climate change, there's things that are happening to our environment that we need to be able to adapt our homes to. Now, I am very lucky to have a beautiful family. I got a best friend and a wife, Devin, and I've got two adorable daughters who are becoming climate activists themselves. And a few years ago, I asked their teachers, because as you know, I'm pretty interested in a passive house. And I said to them, would you be interested to learn about passive house and learn about some building sciences? And they said yes. So I've been able to teach at their classes, and then I actually was able to teach now at other schools around Vancouver. And so today is being able to talk to you about how we can make our buildings more comfortable, healthy, and energy efficient. So this blue marble, what is this blue marble? Yes, it's the third rock from the sun. And again, I know you big kids, I know you want to put some chatter in there, so you can put some notes in the chat about what this blue rock is. So you can raise your hand. Yes, it's Earth. Now, the interesting thing about this lovely blue planet is my good friend Zach really wanted to make a bit of perspective of how we use this planet. That we actually only really live in this thin blue layer around Earth. And if we look at an apple, he indicates that really we're looking at that skin. And so what we do to this skin on this apple is kind of what happens on Earth. And so what I wanted to look at is how we live on this Earth. Now, there's a big term called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but what are some of the things that we need to sustain life? So again, we have Kevin and Mark and Shannon are raising their hand quite nicely, and I would call upon them and I would say, Shannon, what would you say? And Shannon says, oh, we need fresh air. And I would say, absolutely. And I would ask young Kevin, what else will we need on Earth? And he says, oh, we need healthy fruit and vegetables and food. And I would say, absolutely. And then we have Norm. We got young Norm there. And Norm would say, oh, we need good health care. We need supports. And I would say, yep, absolutely. And then someone else, we have Zach, and Zach would say, oh, we need fresh water. And then we'd also ask more things, and someone would say shelter. And so you're absolutely right. So we have those hierarchy of needs that we need to be able to sustain in life. And so today we're going to focus on one of those elements, which is shelter. Now, here's some images of some shelter that I deem kind of fun and important. These are a couple of buildings that I built and renovated, and one of my favorite ones, which of course is Falling Water. And so we're going to talk about one of those aspects that we really need to live, which is our shelter. So we're going to what shelter looks like, because shelter has evolved. We looked at where we were born in caves, and we've evolved from caves and cabins into palaces, and also different types of homes. So in Vancouver, we have a very specific type of homes we live in. We look at houses, which are pretty typical. About 70% of the homes in Vancouver are single family homes. The other ones are multifamily, where condos and townhouses and where there's more people living all together in different units. And when we look at buildings play a big part of the emissions. So we talked about before of energy. So now we're going to look at, okay, well, how does energy affect our homes, and what can we do to make our homes using less energy and affecting that, again, that lovely blue line and what we're doing to it. So buildings play a very important role in how we live in society. And we look at even more in depth, we look at space heating, how we heat the water, as well the cooling. That's a very important. So if we could fix that particular thing, we could actually really work on on how we can improve and make our buildings more energy efficient. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive in that. And what we're talking about here could be towards the homes that you live in, but the school that you're in, and all the different kind of buildings. So what we're talking about today is applicable to all types of shelter. All types of buildings is what we're going to take a deep dive into. And so we have all the different kinds, schools, buildings, and all the different type of houses. So give you an idea of just, we can talk about your house specifically, your school specifically, or other types of buildings. And what we're going to talk about today are 5 classic passive house principles of what we could do to improve that energy efficiency on our home. So, you ready with me? Hopefully I've inspired you and you remember your house and you're going to be thinking about your house during this entire process, okay? So follow along on this journey with me as we're going to look at these 5 passive house principles. Number 1 is continuous insulation. What do I mean by continuous insulation? Well, what I'm talking about is putting on insulation around your building. So in your home, you're quite happy with how it functions. It functions with the kitchen, it functions with the bathrooms and your bedrooms. But how we want to make our buildings more energy efficient is looking at that the skin, looking at the assemblies. So the walls, the roof, the floors. We're going to take a deep dive now into how we can look at that particular part of your home. And number 1 is looking at continuous insulation. And one way we talk about is adding more insulation around that, which is kind of like putting on a sweater. So you might have had it where you might have had a cold day and you asked your parent, hey, can you please turn up the temperature? And they said, put on a sweater. Well, that's the same process that we want to talk about putting on to our shelters, putting on a sweater around our building. And we could even be a little bit more finicky and say we're going to put slippers on the basement floor. We're going to put the sweater on around all the walls, and then we're going to put a hat or a toque or a beanie on our head and make sure that entire shell is now encompassed with lots of insulation. Because we know when we get into that nice warm cozy jacket, we feel pretty good even in those cold temperatures. That's that whole image, is we want to make our shelter happy by wrapping it in a lovely sweater. The second part of this is making our buildings more airtight. And what I mean by that is that we want to wrap our buildings so that all of the little pinholes, all of the opportunities for air to get out, because we've spent a lot of energy in creating that nice warm space that we like, or cooling depending on where we're at in the months. But I'm going to focus today a little bit more on how and when we're heating the home, because we don't want that heat to escape through those holes. So we're going to wrap our home. There's another way we could look at that. Imagine your home like a present, and we're going to wrap it. To build new homes, and so wrap those homes like a present, and then at the very end, I put a bow on it, and I give it to the clients, and now they got a nice present. So that's that image now of taking your home, and we're going to make it airtight. Make sure that none of that heat escapes. The third one is a little bit tricky, but because now that we've wrapped it and we made it airtight, and we put the sweater on, we need to make sure that we can actually breathe inside of that shelter. And so what we do is we have a machine called an HRV. I know that's a big technical term. It's a heat recovery ventilator. Parts of the world, it might be an ERV, but just imagine it's a big box, and it has all these like octopus parts that go to the rest of the building. And so you're going to make sure that you're pulling out the bad air or the stale air that comes from your bathrooms and your kitchens, and we're going to put in lovely fresh air into your bedrooms, into your living spaces. So just imagine this box, this fresh air machine, is like the lungs of your building. It's what makes sure that you get that freshness that you're looking for. And again, if you get it, you understand it, and it'll be great. So the fourth one here is a little bit tricky. It's no thermal bridges. And so what this context is really talking about is heat escaping through your shelter, through your envelope, through. So you can see here, the yellow is in the studs, and you can see the heat leaving from the windows. So if we wrap the insulation around your building, that heat is not getting through those materials. And so here's one slide where you can see that the color, the bright colors, that's the heat leaving the building. They've wrapped it with insulation, and windows, which we'll talk about next, are definitely higher performing as well. So what's nice about these principles is that we get to use some pretty cool devices to verify that we've made these improvements. In this particular option right now is a thermal imaging camera, and you can see here, I've used that cool thermal imaging camera on my kids, and you can't really see it, but one of my daughters is holding up her thumb because she's finding this stuff pretty cool, because she's seeing that she actually has some pretty cool superpowers that we'll showcase a little bit later. And you can see my dog, it's a pretty hot dog. So with the thermal bridge is we want to be able to minimize how all that heating is coming out of our building. And with this particular image, we can see it. And so we can use this particular tool to verify that if we've done the right job by ensuring that that particular heating is not leaving our buildings. All right, number 5 on the list of improvements that we can do to our buildings to make them more energy efficient is our windows and doors. So again, when we talked about insulating our whole buildings, there's one area that you can't put insulation around the walls, the roof, is the daylighting system. So again, we're talking about windows and doors where we're able to bring in the outside environment into it. And what we want to do is make that particular device more energy efficient. And so we can add on more layers, and we can fill the glass and change that as well. So we're going to be improving the frame and the glass so that they're high performing. And what's nice now is all of these Passivals principles are actually being applied now to many buildings here in Vancouver. So this whole context we can actually go and see. And what's really cool here locally, is one of the original buildings of Passivals is actually located in Canada. So it's pretty cool to have a Canadian tie to what we're up to. Passivals Canada now has a map where you can actually go and see these buildings. You could go for a walk. There's actually an area there I call the unofficial Passivos Street of Dreams, where you could see all these different types of passive houses that, again, were regular buildings, but the builder, the team, the architect were able to improve by incorporating these 5 Passivos principles. So again, when we look at those elements, just to kind of make sure they landed with you, because I kind of went by them fast, is number 1, we talk about adding a sweater. Number 2 is gift homes. Number 3 was the fresh air machine. Number 4 was using the thermal bridges. Number 5 was high performance windows and doors. So now you have a good understanding of those 5 Passivals principles that can be used to making our buildings more energy efficient. Let's take a bit of a deeper dive of kind of how that looks like. Because when we do those, when we implement those principles, we end up having a lot of benefits. And I won't go through all these benefits, but I'll land on a couple that I think might be relevant and might be interesting to you. So we want our buildings to be more comfortable. That means when you go from room to room, that the temperature is the same. So question for you is, what temperature in your homes do you think you like? Now, this particular question, you might not know the temperature. Maybe your teacher wants to answer this, or my good friend Shannon or Kevin might want to know, or let us know. Probably going to say 20 degrees Celsius. And if you're our friends in the US, you might say it's 69, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But that will range between 19 and 24. So, but we want to make sure, though, that when we're in that building, and if we build a window or the middle of the room, that the temperature stays the same. And a pass, we can have that occurring. Now, with that fresh air machine, we're actually going to have filtered fresh air. And so the indoor air quality is going to be really improved. And with those high performance, they're actually going to help make the rooms and your indoors a lot more. Going to hear the cars outside, or maybe your neighbors outside. So it's going to be a quieter space. And the last one I'll leave you with is it's going to be bug free. So all those holes where spiders are allowed to crawl through, those now get closed up. And so your homes are going to have less bugs and less dust. So hopefully those benefits make this whole process really interesting. So now I want to dive into some demonstrations to see how we can apply, or how you can maybe have a better understanding of what these principles really look like. So a few years ago, I had the opportunity of being involved with the Icebox Challenge, and we're able to take 2 boxes. So now, let me take a step back. when we build a building to today's standards, we call those code houses. Those are built to today's standards. Now, if we build another box to, or including the passive house principles, we would call that a passive house. So just imagine you see here, we have two different boxes. One is built to code and the other one is built to passive house. And so what we did is we put a whole bunch of ice. I asked my friends to come join me, and there's a few friends that are in behind the video that lifted all their muscles, and we put these big blocks of ice into these boxes, and we closed them and we left them for a few weeks. And we got to see which box performed better than the other one, meaning that the melting of ice occurred more in one versus the other. And the exhibit turned so well that we actually took it across the North America. But guess what we're happening today is we're going to bring the Icebox Challenge to your classroom. So just before the presentation started, I actually set it up. So let's go over here to this screen where we will show. So first, I'm just going to set this up. We need that one. So in this box, in this house, this box right here is a code house. And you could see that we've already got some ice in there. And guess what? What do we see in there? We actually even have some water. So the ice in here is already melting in our code house. And if we look in our cooler, well, guess what? This cooler is surrounded by a lot more insulation than the code house. And so let's just see how this particular ice is doing. Okay, well, you look in here, there's a lot less water in this one compared to the other one. And just for comparison, I made another cooler, but in this particular case, I used more natural materials for insulation. And you could see that these two, again, are pretty similar compared to the other one. Now, after our conversation, after we have a discussion, we'll come back and look at the two and see which one's winning. Now, do you have a guess of which one you think will perform better than the other one? And what I mean is, which one, when we come back, will have no ice and a lot of water, and maybe another one that'll have more ice and less water? I think you might know which one will win, but don't tell your neighbors or don't tell your friends. We'll see how that works. So that's the that's the first demonstration. The second demonstration is a little bit more complex. So I'm going to pass on that one. I'm going to substitute one that I think might work better. When we talk about airtightness, we're kind of like putting a balloon around our house. So imagine you're inside this. So this is like your house. All of that heat that was generated is still in here. But if we have a leaky house, all of that air is going to get out. So you get an idea of how much energy that was for me to blow up this balloon, but I couldn't because it was leaky. So if you wanted, which balloon would you prefer? The one balloon that actually could blow up, that you could actually enjoy, or the one that has a whole bunch of holes? I think you know the answer to that one. Now, the third demonstration is a little bit difficult. Hopefully we'll get this thing to work. I want to come back to your superpowers, because you saw earlier that my daughters have superpowers. Well, you do as well. And so we have this fun tool that we have, the thermal imaging camera that I described earlier. Well, we can actually use it to see your superpowers. So if you can see on the wall right here that right now, when I put my hand up here, I can't see my superpowers. We need this lovely tool. So I'm going to leave my superpowers on it. And I don't think, if I can come here closer, if I can aim it, well, I'll come back. But just to let you know, I did transfer my superpowers to this wall. And we'll filter that camera a little more to talk about that. And the last demonstration is going to take a few seconds. So I'm going to let that start up. But what we have here are a few demonstrations to talk about the building science as well as some of those principles. So we talked about the insulation. We talked about, in a sense, that cooler, how that insulation is wrapped around those boxes. And so none of the heat that's up into those coolers. We talked about with the balloons. And the other fun device is, so you have here radiant light coming through, and if I put in glass, you can see here, that's one pane of glass, and you can feel the heat through that a little bit. And if we do another one, now there's less heat coming through that. And so this particular device, we can talk about energy and the mode, because energy transfers in 3 different methods: conduction, convection, and radiation. And we can see that with this particular demonstration. Now, the last demonstration that we have going on is this kettle. And this particular kettle, I'll try to bring it a little bit closer. It's going to take a few minutes to get there, but this particular kettle, we can talk about water. Because when we're building buildings, one of the things we really need to worry about is how water, and we kind of talk about liquid water or bulk water, how water, we need to make sure that it stays away from our buildings, as well as it stays in our plumbing pipes, in our sinks, and our showers, and stays there. But it can change. And so this last demonstration, we talk about the phases of water, how it goes from ice, which we have over here. So we have, ice, we have liquid water, and then water will evaporate into gas. And so you can see here with the temperature of that kettle, move this a little closer to the camera. No, it's better up here. Anyhow, you can see with the bubbles, I put the water is changed from a solid form, a liquid into a gas. So I'll let that continue because I've made a mistake, and maybe I'll stop and we can have a discussion now. So thank you very much. A little bit of homework if you so choose. I hate to be that teacher or instructor that talks about homework, but when you go home tonight, maybe you can ask your parents about what type of insulation you have in your home, how many layers of glass you have in your windows, and maybe you'll find out where all the spiders are coming in and maybe figure out how to close those up. So a little bit of homework for you. There are some resources that I'll share in a few minutes, but thank you, my big kids, for joining. And I hope that you'll learn a little bit about how to make our buildings more energy efficient, and it ends up making them also more comfortable and healthy, and it'll keep out the bugs.